preparations of state Baptist conventions across the nation have been in full swing since late September. In Alabama, the annual meeting will take place November 15 and 16 at Shades Mountain Baptist Church in Birmingham. This is a Tab Media special report ahead of that meeting. I'm your host, Jennifer Rash, and joining me is special guest Dr. Rick Lance, Executive Director of the Alabama Baptist State Board of Missions. Hello, Dr. Lance.
Well, hello, Jennifer, and let me commend you on your podcast. I'm hearing great things, and I've listened to them, and you do a very personal and professional job of it, and I appreciate that, as I know all of your listeners do.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that too. I've had fun with the special reports and get to talk to lots of interesting people and cover lots of intriguing topics. I'm not sure a state convention annual meeting is intriguing, but it is definitely interesting and always important. I was thinking about this morning that you are less than 2 weeks away from go time. So tell us what's in your mind right now. What's going through your mind as you get ready for these last few days?
Well, my mind feels like a train station where trains are all coming in from different directions. That's one analogy I'd use. There might be some others. But seriously, the state convention meeting ought to be considered in a couple of ways. Number one, it ought to be considered a reunion because we don't get together that much as Baptists. We are a family of faith. The SBC is true the same way. We see each other at venues such as that at SBC and state convention. So, in one sense of the word, we have a family reunion, and there are all kinds of auxiliary meetings and luncheons and dinners where groups that have affinity groups that have a kind of connection that even amplifies that family reunion atmosphere. Now, from my standpoint, a family reunion, because I go about as what I might call a universal guest in churches, and I'm somewhere almost all the time, but I don't often get to see a lot of Alabama Baptists together. So for me, it is a family reunion, but I have one big hindrance, and that is I feel almost sequestered on the stage and whatever, because things have to move pretty quickly. We don't have a lot of time, day and a half. So we that's the second component, family reunion, and also family business.
Right.
Every year we do have matters that have to be considered. Some of them are often viewed as boilerplate matters. We do them annually, but it's very serious and very important matters. When you think about when you vote on a budget as messengers, you are empowering your funds, that is your gifts through the cooperative program, to touch the lives in Alabama, North America, and around the world. So that's no small feat. Alabama is a 50-50 state in the truest, purest sense of the word or term. We have, for a number of years now, been 50% SBC, 50% state convention, and it has helped Alabama maintain the status of being number one in giving to SBC causes. Now, I often say we're not the largest state convention. We don't have the largest number of big churches or mega churches of that sort, but we have in our people some of the most generous sacrificial givers. So that's an item of business we have to consider. There are other mundane matters we have to deal with, mundane until you have to use them, and that is audit. Every entity has to have an audit, and the State Board of Missions is not excluded from that. In fact, we're included on a 6th-level audit process, and that is something. We also set goals for Lottie Moon and Annie Armstrong, and yes, Myers Mallory, the global hunger, and the Children's Home Offering. Those things are very good measurements for Alabama Baptists in terms of how they are being able to give and make sure that they have an impact, not only here in Alabama, but yes, I say in North America and around the world. So those may be considered not so distinguishing and maybe not the most bling bling things you do, but they are very important. Also this year, we have a convention sex abuse task force that will need to make a report. They have worked as hard as any group I've seen in my almost 25 years of service. They have taken this very seriously. They've been, as you know, they've interviewed every entity leader. They have helped entity leaders and the entity themselves be able to determine best practices and in terms of policies, prevention and protection of sexual abuse. They've also asked very salient questions, very important questions to each entity leader. The State Board of Missions definitely was right at the center of that process. And I'm looking forward to their report. Now, it may come across to some a little bit lengthy. It may come across to some, well, it's a report. You're telling us what you did, but it is an accountability report. We need to understand that. It's an accountability report, and it hopefully will set the example for churches because there is in the report some very strong suggestions for churches in regard to how they can handle the sex abuse issue and protection and prevention. In addition to all that, Jennifer, if I could elaborate further, and when you ask me a question, I often say to people when somebody asks me a question, I start with Adam and Eve and go forward. We're delighted this year to have Robert Smith back with us. He's a favorite among Alabama Baptists, and certainly with me, I've really grown to love and appreciate him. He's a man of integrity, a man of the word, and he's also one of the most brilliant and radiant kind of preachers. He's almost indescribable in the way he's able to deliver God's message. He's always encouraging. He fits his audience. He kind of interviewed me as to what he felt, what I felt ought to have happen in accord with our theme, Celebrate, which I should have mentioned early on. And it's based on Psalm 100, of course. We're celebrating, setting off a soft launch, if you will, of our 200th anniversary. This will be our 199th meeting of an annual meeting of the state convention, and next year would be 200. And we're not going to spend a whole lot of time looking back in history. Actually, we'll probably spend more time learning from history and being able to live in the present and look to the future, having learned some lessons from the past, good and bad, learning from good and bad experiences. But the Celebrate theme covers all of it, from the entity reports to the theme interpretations to almost everything we do. And I also need to mention a dear friend, Willie McLaren. I've really grown to appreciate Willie. He's the interim acting president and CEO of the Southern Baptist Executive Committee. Now, that's a challenging role, just even in the interim capacity, if you will. But Willie is a remarkable man. He has a saying that I love, and every time I hear him say it, I just almost get chill bumps. He said, "I want to be scripturally fed and spirit led." Now, you ponder that a little bit. You cannot hardly argue. If you're scripturally fed, you can be spirit led. And Willie exemplifies that. He handles issues very well. He has outstanding relational skills, and he has already endeared himself with Alabama Baptists. He's attended many of the state convention meetings already across the landscape of Southern Baptist life. So we're glad to have him. We also are blessed in having Buddy Champion as our president. Buddy is one of those affable yet strong leaders, and I think he's done a superb job in being able to represent Alabama Baptist well. He's gone beyond the call of duty to be in meetings, and I tell you, there are a lot of meetings, and I told him we need to prioritize those for him, and I think he'll get better if he's able to serve a second term. But he's really been available. Now, some of it's been through Zoom, but Buddy has served us well, very well, and I'm proud of him. Joel Carwile is one of the better preachers in our state. Joel is at First Baptist Church of Athens. He'll be delivering the convention sermon, and Buddy will be doing the president's address. The convention sermon is always, in my mind, an important time to hear from one of our own. We never have an outsider that I know of ever in our history who's done a convention sermon. It's always been one of us. And Joel will do that well. As the theme interpretations this year, as you know, because you're working with us on this to a great degree, we'll be able to flesh out what Psalm 100 means from our history to our present and what it means to our future. We'll be thinking about what God has done, what God is doing, what God can do in the future. And with those focus points on a celebration. I think Alabama Baptists can feel not a sense of pride in the wrong sense of the word, but a sense of humility
Mhm.
that we can be proud of what God has done, but humbled by our past and also exhilarated in the opportunities as we look to the future. I think this convention has the possibility of being one of our better ones in the sense of being able to rejoice together, have this reunion, and yet reflect upon the past and be able to look to the future with an expectation that only God can give. So I am delighted that, and I want to invite people to come state convention, and I would love for you to register as messengers. We'd like to keep a record of messengers. We try to do that every year. It helps in a lot of ways, almost like a census of things. We also would like to register guests. We're having challenges being able to determine how best to do that. But if you go to the information desk, if you're a guest, exhibitor, or whatever, that would help us know actually how many people are there and also who comes as guests and perhaps give us an opportunity to survey that some and broaden the spectrum of inviting people to come as guests to the convention. So Jennifer, you're talking to the guy that's helping make the sausage, and I don't even eat sausage, help to make the sausage. And I hope it is going to be tasty and palatable. I always do. We always have some degree of business. Resolutions are always interesting. They can be very interesting in debate, and I'm sure we'll have several of those, or maybe more than several this year. The resolutions committee, as I looked over it the other day, they're good wordsmiths and very reasonable people and ones that represent the consensus of Alabama Baptist life. I know they'll do a good job with that. And
Have
so,
they been able to mention how many proposals they've received yet or any kind of topics?
well, even if I knew that, I couldn't tell you
Oh, come
because
on.
I do that because
I try. I had to try. I had to try.
it's in their domain. That's not my responsibility. That's in their domain. But in the climate we're in, you would recognize that there would be some proposed resolutions to be brought before them. They have a work day coming up pretty soon, and they'll work through those and be prepared as best they can for the convention and wordsmith it is in the proper form.
And they end up meeting quite a bit going into the convention and then during the convention, right? Getting all that ready.
Yes, standing rules, if they're voted on and accepted this year, the most recent standing rules of how we operate at and function at the convention
Mhm.
means that no new resolution can be presented after the first the morning session. That gives them time to be able to go through what might be presented and maybe still work on what they have and enjoy some parts of the convention. Because you're talking about, I used the word sequestered, and years ago, they never went to anything. They just stayed in the resolutions room and came out to make a report, almost like jurors in a court case or something. But they do an excellent job. We've really never had any real challenges with the people on the resolutions committee. We've really never had terribly bad hiccups on the state convention floor when they've been addressed.
Mhm.
I think that speaks to the desire for unity and consensus on the part of Alabama Baptists. That doesn't mean we all believe the same thing about everything,
Right.
but we do have a commonality that's so large that the points at which we disagree are very small.
Mhm. It does seem to be the culture at the conventions every year. There is an excitement to get back together, as you were mentioning the family reunion. The feel is there, and when it's time to do business, people are serious, but they're cordial. That is interesting. What do you think makes that happen?
Well, there's a generally good spirit among Alabama Baptists that I can determine. That doesn't mean there aren't people concerned about this or that.
Right.
But one thing about a state convention versus an SBC, a larger SBC meeting, the
Mhm.
people in the state convention have a greater potential of knowing each other.
True.
They converse with each other. They are friends, colleagues. If you get on the broader landscape of the SBC, they may only know each other through social media, and that may not be altogether healthy.
Mhm.
But on the state convention, and even more so on an associational level, you have people who've been around each other, unless they're real new to the state, and that just brings more cordiality, even at a point of disagreement. There's
Mhm.
much more cordiality. So that would be one theory
Yeah.
that's not just applicable to Alabama Baptist life, but to every state convention. I might add that I've tried to monitor the other conventions who go early. Some of them begin as early as September, like Alaska, and you were there for that, and it goes all the way into we're the last up. There are several of us that are last up.
Okay.
Georgia, I think, is next week, and then I believe Tennessee, Florida, and Alabama, or at
South
least three
Carolina.
of South Carolina, that meet about the same time. And the reason for that, traditionally, state conventions in the southern region have tried to meet close to get beyond the associational season
Mhm.
and yet not get into the Thanksgiving season. So that really means right in the early part of to mid part of November is when most of them meet.
And the typical routine would be for associations to have their annual meetings first before the state convention. That's pretty much across the board, right? That how that works?
Throughout the southern region, that's pretty much the norm.
Okay. Okay. Hmm. Okay, so for business sake, then we got resolutions. There could be business items that show up. You'd mentioned the sexual abuse task force report, the audit committee, the insurance committee. Just for clarity on those, you mentioned it, but I wanted to repeat it. These committees are convention based. They're for the Alabama Baptist State Convention aspect, and they do um, accountability work. Would that be a right way to say for all the cooperative program funded entities?
Right. Every cooperative program funded entity
Mhm,
has to do an audit
mhm,
because if they receive even a small amount of cooperative program, we
right,
require an audit. There would be an exception probably for ALCAP. They do their own auditing because they are not, their board is not determined by the state convention. So it's a different kind of arrangement. But the auditing is just good business. It is accountability. But Jennifer, the difference between now, say in the 1990s, and I know that sounds like a lifetime ago, but yes, I guess it is. But in the 90s, we voted on everything that an entity did. Let's just say if the Alabama Baptists were to have built a building, the
mhm.
convention voted on it, which,
Oh, okay.
yeah, and we looked at them not legally, but functionally like agencies. Now we use the word entity. The entity is a different from an agency. An agency is a direct, the parent company kind of approach.
Okay.
Well, in 1998 bylaws with the corporate integrity for ascending and descending liability purposes, entities, their trustees vote on what they do. That's why we call them trustees. We trust that they will do the right thing. They're stewards of the entity.
Mhm.
So they report to the state convention, they report to the state board of missions, but we don't vote on their report because we don't want to be seen like we're doing micromanagement of their business.
Right.
And that this climate, legally, that's the best way to do it. So
Mhm.
therefore, every report is not voted on. In fact, few things are. And the reason for that is if there were problems with an entity and they face challenges, and
Mhm.
we've had some of that, that is handled more so behind the scenes. And if it's not able to be resolved there, then it's brought to the convention. But let's just say the Alabama Baptists were sued over some issue related to a piece of property you might own or something like that.
Mhm.
Technically, you are an entity of the state convention, but your trustees are empowered to be the stewards of that trustee and you're to be the leader of it.
Mhm.
But the state convention does not take responsibility for every decision you make.
Right.
That's a protection, if you will, a good protection of cooperative program. And
Mhm.
that's also a good protection of all the entities from being a collective kind of target in a
Right.
lawsuit, including the state board of missions. So I know
Mhm.
I got off the,
Mhm.
and
No, that's
that's
good. That's
the,
actually helpful because I think a lot of times, it gets confusing for people that the Alabama Baptist State Convention, the Alabama Baptist State Board of Missions, and
right.
while you're seen on the stage at the convention meeting because you're technically the treasurer by way of your position as the executive director of the State Board of Admissions, it can all get really kind of clunky and confusing. So it's always interesting to kind of pull it back out to showcase how this all works together.
I should mention this, but I was deposed some time ago, and I am deposed every now and then over lawsuits relating to churches and
Right.
sometimes with entities, as you know. And a lawyer, I explained how it worked, and a lawyer and they was videoing this, and he asked the videographer to turn it off, and he looked at me and he said, "That doesn't make any sense." And I told him, I said, "I didn't say it made sense. I just it works." That's how Baptists work, and it works.
That's funny. That's I could see how that would be
Yeah,
very confusing. Yeah.
they expect us to be a hierarchy.
Yeah.
We're called a denomination, but we're really denomination-like. A
Yeah.
convention is not a denomination, but in order for nomenclature to be standardized, they call us a denomination. But when they think of a denomination, they think of hierarchy. Someone at the top is delegating all the way down to even to the local churches.
Mhm.
In other words, this pyramid like this. Well, in Baptist life, the pyramid's like this.
Local church is the
Yeah, that's right.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Wow. And and then the state convention annual meeting itself, the state convention is the annual meeting. It's made up of all of these parts, but it exists those 2 days, right? That
It's
basically,
a day and a half,
yeah.
and technically, the state convention does its business there and then entrusts those who are recipients of cooperative program money and ministry assignments to
Mhm,
do their work diligently for the glory of God and for the good of the convention.
mhm. And so with that knowledge, is that one reason why you would encourage churches to send messengers so that they are part of they have their voice at the table, they're part of the decision making?
Yes, and a messenger, years ago when we were just getting started as Southern Baptists, the term was used delegates, but
Okay.
it really meant messengers.
Mhm.
A delegate is someone told to do something at a convention. This is what you're supposed to do when you get there at a meeting.
Got it.
A messenger is one who participates in the business of a meeting and goes back home with the opportunity to tell the church what happened.
Okay.
So they're representing the church as a messenger, but they're not told what to do. Whereas a delegate, like a delegate to a Republican convention or Democrat convention, they're already they're already on record. They're going to do this or that. So that's why we moved away from the word delegate
That makes sense.
to messenger many, many years ago, in fact, a long time ago.
Mhm. So
Way
then the church so the churches would have to do their due diligence in selecting their messengers with that concept in mind too, who they would
yeah,
have representing them, right?
we have to remind ourselves this, and I think this is missed on a lot of people. The Southern Baptist Convention is the largest deliberative body in the world. Potentially, a 10-year-old can go to a microphone and make a motion. Now, that may not be particularly wise. The largest deliberative body in the world will be state conventions. It is built on, as you will, almost pure democracy when you're meeting.
Mhm.
And that is, you have leaders who have tried to do their best to prepare for the convention. So that's what we do as a staff here. We tell our people we prepare for a good convention, and when it gavels in, it's up to the messengers whether or not they have a good one.
Mm.
It's our motto around here. For every opportunity for the convention to have a good convention. And the messengers have responsibility then, of course, making sure that convention is good and proper, that it befits what we are, who we are as God's people, and it brings Him glory, not just someone getting their way on a particular issue or whatever. And if we keep that in mind, that helps us a good bit. That's similar to church life. It's all about Him, it's not about us. But we do have to have, when you have an almost freestyle convention meeting, you have to have someone setting the table
Mhm.
or there'll be chaos. So that's the responsibility of the State Board of Admissions staff. Of course, I give leadership to that. And then when we gavel in, we have presiding officers, we have parliamentarians, and we have various committees, entities, boards who are presenting And it's all done in a way where there is movement to it, productivity, but not a stalling or a stalemating of the process. In other words, it's not like watching a television show when it goes blank,
Right.
going to a commercial. There's always, hopefully, a seamless kind of process that gives the messengers an opportunity to not only experience a good convention, but to be able to enjoy telling what happened at the convention to the people back home.
You have an incredible staff that works really, really hard putting this on, getting ready. I know you're already thinking about 2 years out, 3 years out, even as you go. And it's built all through the year to get ready for it. How do you land on a theme and picking Robert Smith or, the different speakers? How do you decide those kinds of
Well,
things?
the theme is left up, actually, it's left up to the Committee on Order of Business, the theme,
Mhm.
and they have parameters. They're the ones who will, if a motion's brought up, it will be referred to them and recommended what to do with it. They have pre-convention duties and during the convention duties,
Okay.
which they're a very important group, and you don't see them that much, but when you do see them, you know their importance. So they help us with the theme. Um, they do ask what we think ought to be the theme. We do this sometime out. And especially as we're coming to the 200th anniversary, we did pre-planning way back when. We've had a lot of distractions, of course, with COVID and some other things that are a part of the life cycle, if you will. But the theme we've tried to do is go to a one-word theme because we used to have phrases.
Mhm.
Even if you had to take two words and make it one, like we're doing in society and marketing today, we feel like a one-word theme and let it be permeating the program and the psyche of all the people involved helps us have a clearer focus at a convention rather than just having a convention. We're experiencing a point of emphasis at a convention, especially this one, which helps us celebrate God, what He's doing,
Yeah.
and join in on that celebration. It should be a happy time. I know a lot of this is business. It's like church business meetings. You've got mundane things, but really there is nothing truly mundane about what we do. It's all very necessary. So the decision, the planning, is built around the theme, and we work with the Committee on Order of Business to determine who it's their responsibility for Tuesday night.
Mhm.
Now, the Committee on Time, Place, and Preacher determines who's the convention preacher,
Okay.
the place where we are, like Shays Mountain, and the time, which is usually the first, the near the time we're talking about here, give or take, right in the middle of November. That's a suggested time for us. So they have a lot of input, but they also give us enormous freedom. They have in the past, at least, given us enormous freedom because we live with this every day.
Okay.
We have a focus here on not only what we're doing in ministry assignments, but in a joint sort of way, collectively, we're thinking now, how can we help the state convention understand the ministries being performed in the name of Jesus and on behalf of Alabama Baptist? The entities help do that, of course, because they have ministry assignments, but the State Board of Missions would be the fiduciary and missionary arm of the convention. And that means uh, we're supposed to help give guidance to the convention as to where where we feel led to go as a convention. And that has worked real well. I mean, we've had our hiccups. You think about all the moving parts of a convention,
Right.
it is amazing that it comes together. Now, I'll go back. I go back when I was a younger pastor. There probably wasn't as much concern about time, and we ran over. And that's not in this day and time, that is not a good thing.
Everybody's out the door anyway.
To the extent we can manage that,
Yeah.
now it's up to the messengers if they want to have a lengthy debate, but that has been rare. I can't think of one in my tenure, but I can remember one time at a convention years ago, and I probably shouldn't mention this, but at 7 o'clock, we ended the afternoon session.
Wow.
I had that in the back of my head and we want, in the truest spiritual sense of the word, not secular. we want to do this with excellence because our Lord deserves it and our people deserve it.
Mhm.
We want to do what we do with excellence. Now, do we always get there? No. And I walk away every year thinking, I do a ministry audit in my head and I share it with others. We gather together. This could have gone better. This could have gone better. This could have gone better. It's a process. I hate to use a Saban word, but it is a process. And I have no small amount of perfectionism in me that wants to see it go as near perfect as possible because we do want to strive for excellence.
Mm. Well, it shows that you put a lot of effort into it. You can see with just the programming, the agenda, the way it flows. So, in the 27 years I've been watching it happen, it's been something to watch to see how you put it together. So, I am always encouraged to see what's going to come at the next convention. And as an entity leader, we are very appreciative that you allow us a spot on the program and that we get to share with the messengers as well.
We,
Before I let you go, I want to find out about this new podcast I'm hearing about. I think
okay.
you are going to be a new podcast host, if I'm correct.
Yes. And that probably makes me shake in my boots because I've never done that. Uh, we're late to this. We've been planning for more than 5 years for this to happen. We had and the downsizing, right sizing of our staff, the move here, all of the other things, and then the unforeseen stuff that comes our way. We finally we're finally able to launch it. We call it One Mission, the
Okay.
podcast. And really, you can go anywhere, any app, whether it's on the Apple app or Spotify or wherever you get your podcast. And the title will be One Mission. And
Okay.
what we'll try to do is do very practical, personalized kind of interviews like you're doing here,
Okay.
and take the angle of helping encourage pastors, staff people, and also church leaders and anyone else, encouraging them in their ministry. We live in this time of immense discouragement, but basically encouraging them on the one mission we have, which is the Great Commission. And we have already lined up some future people to be interviewed, and some of them will be related to this upcoming meeting of the state convention. So
Okay.
I'm looking forward to learning, taking baby steps and learning this. I may need to be coached a little bit by you on how
Oh,
to do
you'll
it.
do great.
We'll give it a try. And we know that it's a soft launch. We know we'll start small and hope it becomes a bigger audience. But the size of the audience is not as important to us as the quality of what we try to do and giving people the sense of encouragement to be on mission with the Great Commission.
Mhm. Fantastic. So, One Mission is the podcast, anywhere you get your podcast, and that you can find it at alsbaum.org/podcast.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Okay. All right. Well, Dr. Lance, thank you so much. I've enjoyed chatting.
Well, I've enjoyed it too. I didn't know what all it would be like, but you again know how to host something, and you also know how to lead very well. And I want to say this, Jennifer, Alabama Baptists are proud of you, and we're proud of Alabama Baptist, the paper. And you brought another step of excellence toward the production of what you do, and you've personalized it so well. My wife, if she were sitting here, would rave over your rational thoughts. Not that I don't, but she really enjoys that. She thinks you're the number one. So I just wanted to say that to you, that you're well beloved by Alabama Baptists.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
All right. Glad to be with you too.